I don't know why, but we just decided it would be fun to challenge King's College, who are our varsity rivals, to a game of women's rugby. We threw the ball up and down and learnt how to tackle and things like that. And then we went out and played. I personally, and I know some of the others, just came off of that and thought that was the best thing I'd ever done. Establishing the first Women's World Cup was not something that I really appreciated or thought about till many years later. We've just had the 10th Women's World Cup and we've had 10 Men's World Cups. If we had not done that, somebody said, we may not even have had a Women's World Cup. I've always wanted to get away from the suggestion that I'm just the president of the women's section. I am president of the RFU, the whole lot. I love rugby, whoever it's played by. I wanted to get away from the fact that I'm just only thinking about women's rugby, because I'm not.
This podcast is brought to you by Night Timber, official sparkling wine of England Rugby.
Deb, welcome to Rugby Lives, or rather, you're welcoming us at your lovely rugby club.
Yeah, to my club, yes. I think those of us who've played here and members are very proud of this club for everything, going back to when it was one of the first rugby clubs. It's an FC, as it were. We're very proud of this place.
And it's because you've got dual roles as well, because as well as being president of the RFU, you're also secretary and board director?
I am here. Yeah, that's only been a couple of years. I retired 3.5, nearly 4 years ago, and I retired from being a bursar at Homerton College in Cambridge. And for the 10 years I was up in Cambridge, I was involved with what we call Curfew, Cambridge University Rugby Football Union, which of the university is a member of, as are all the colleges. And I love doing that. And it's always good, if you're at HQ, as it were, to see what's happening on the other side, what the communications are, how it's working. So when I retired from work and came back to Twickenham, where I live, I thought, I want to get back involved in the rugby club. And I'm still a member here, so this seemed the obvious place. And when I finished being the president of the RFU, I can still be involved in the game.
How does the process of becoming president of the RFU work? Because I your name's been mentioned with this role for quite a while before you actually took it. Well, in the women's circles, you were sort of saying, Deborah Griffin's going to be the first female president of the RFU. I've heard that a few years ago.
Yeah, I suppose it's pretty obvious in some ways. You under the current regulations, the president has to come from either council, you're on the RFU council, or you're an RFU distinguished member. And all of the distinguished members, bar one, have come from council. And the bar one is Jill Burns. And she became a distinguished member because when we took the RFUW into the RFU in 2012, she was our president. And we wanted her to have a position within the RFU. So she became. So the pool of people from which you can become president is quite small. I was the first woman on council. So, I suppose, it's pretty obvious that if I was going to do it, it was going to be me. And you have to apply, you get interviewed. There's always several people. And then the nominations committee will put somebody forward to council as the person that they think should be doing it.
What was your reaction when you found that you were actually going to be president?
I was pleased. It's interesting because obviously you apply, so you've got the chance to do it. And I applied twice. I didn't get it the first time.
What did they say? Did they say, well, you've got to go back and try harder?
Well, there was two things which were interesting. One of which was I didn't big myself up enough.
Okay.
And if you know anything about men and women, that's not an unusual thing for women not to...
No comment.
Yeah, exactly. So that was, and I worked on it. I actually took on somebody to help me be interviewed and address those
You
concerns.
got a spin doctor.
I got a spin doctor. I don't think she wants to be called a spin doctor. But, that was really, really helpful. And then the other thing was they said, we thought it would be better if you were president during the Women's World Cup year, which I obviously ended up being, which was the following year. And again, I sort of don't particularly align with that, because that would suggest that we only had a female president when there was a women's home World Cup, and of course that shouldn't be the case. I've always wanted to get away from the suggestion that I'm just the president of the women's section, and even last weekend I got asked that, so it's still there. I am president of the RFU, the whole lot. I love rugby, whoever it's played by. I've been involved in the game, whoever it's played by. So, I wanted to get away from the fact that I'm just only thinking about women's rugby, because I'm not.
I mean, it might be easier this year to have just been involved in just the women's game where it's all going great, and then instead you're involved in, at the same time, one of the most seismic votes that the game has seen in years.
Yeah, exactly. But so it was. I didn't really agree with that either. I would have been very happy to have been the president the year before, and maybe there would have been another woman president this year. But as it was, it all turned out well, and I've had a fantastic year.
What's been the role? What do you have to do?
So it's two bits to it, really. One is obviously the ambassadorial role, going to all the games, go to a lot of clubs, watch games, speak at dinners. So that's a big part of it. But you're also very much, I like to think of myself as sort of chief volunteer, because it is a voluntary position. And I like to feel that you're looking after all the volunteers. So you do chair the RFU Council in your presidential year. You attend board, so that you're not on the board, but so that you can sort of link those two up. And it's so there's an administrative bit as well, and you wouldn't believe how much administration there is behind the scenes. So I'm very lucky I live in Twickenham. Not every president does by any means. So I go down there on a Wednesday when most of the staff are in, and that really helps as well, cement that relationship with the staff as well.
Has it been a good year for English rugby across the board? When you're looking back at your year, it's been interesting.
Yes. I mean, we obviously, the men didn't perform as well as they wanted during the Six Nations. We're obviously doing a review. We do a review after every tournament, the women as well. Obviously this one's more important because we so underperformed against what we think we should be doing. I don't think we think there's huge amounts wrong. I probably shouldn't speculate, but I don't think we think there's huge amounts wrong, because we come off, was it 12 unbeaten games, and we had a good autumn internationals. So it's just making sure that over the next, going into the Nations Cup, which we're going into, and then going into the World Cup next year, we're doing everything we can.
I mean, it's just, is it hard to separate yourself as a fan? Because you go in there with hope. We all went in there with hope this year, and England, let's be honest, over the whole history, we've underperformed forever. It's not like England have ever amounted to some of its parts consistently. So you go in there as a fan, so are you able to separate, think, oh, okay, that's annoying, but then you've got to be very clinical as well at the same time?
Yeah, I mean, I of course I want to win. Of course I want to win. But then I also, get to know some of the people as well. And I had to go into the changing rooms to do the capping ceremony, and I went and did Ben Earl's 50th and Sam Underhill's 50th and Marcus Smith's 50th. I mean, even after the French game, where we had put on a very, very good performance and lost by 1 point, was it, or 2 points? It was somber. They don't like, we've all played. Nobody likes to lose. Nobody loses on purpose. And so, they're as devastated as anybody, coaches, players, everyone. They don't go out there to lose. So I suppose I revert almost to my mum mode. I feel so, I want to put my arm around them and go, it's all right, it'll be okay. That's how I end up feeling. That's the mode I go into, rather than a fan mode. It's that sort of, I just really genuinely want them to win for themselves as much as anything.
It's better it happens this Six Nations than next.
Of course, yes.
And I think that's across the board for everyone, isn't it? Everyone feels like everyone talks about a 4-year cycle, but it's not really. Like, it is much closer. Everyone, you see it all the time. Is actually what, say, even with England when they won the World Cup, it was like that last Six Nations was the one that mattered just before.
Yes, of course it does. And that's why, it's good that it's happened now. If it happened next Six Nations, we'd all be very much more anxious than we are. But we've got a lot of clubs. We've got we are where rugby started, so we have high expectations of our performance. But we were in a semi-final in 23. We were in the final in 2019. So there's an element. Yeah, we should be doing better, but it's not disastrous by any means.
And obviously the women's game just flying.
Yeah, and obviously that to come off the World Cup. At one stage after the autumns, I was on 100% record as president, which was unfortunate that got not that it's anything to do with me. I was still,
your name's on the door.
It still would have been lovely to finish the year with that, but that wasn't to be. That's okay, and that's got challenges. It's and I talked to the other unions, especially during the Six Nations, but also during the World Cup. England, we've invested earlier than everybody else. I do think we've probably got quite a special group of players at the moment, and time will tell. That'll be something that history will look back on. But we're not going to stop investing.
No,
we're not. We've got a plan. We've got. We want to make the women's game sustainable financially as much as anything else, and our games at Twickenham and Ashton Gate make money now. It's not that, but we're obviously supporting the team. We employ the team effectively. We do want to have more even contests, but in a way that's not down to us. We have to keep going because we're taking people along with us. It's down to the other unions to do that.
Yeah, because the gap does seem quite big at the moment, especially as like Red Rose have really hit their straps, and that's depth in squad. In every position, there's somewhat before you lose a couple of players. Oh God, who's coming in now? It's like makes no difference.
I know. I mean, I've done 3 caps so far in 3 games, and there've been 2 19-year-olds and a 20-year-old.
Amazing.
And you go, wow, and they're coming in and they don't look out of place. They're coming in, and obviously it's always easier to bring 1 or 2 people or 3 people into a successful setup. The girls embrace them. They get used very early how things are, and so that's easier for us again. I think we will just keep investing. We will just keep and I don't think the other unions want us not to. But it's interesting. Wales celebrated because they scored 4 tries against us. But that's good. They hadn't done that. They can see themselves progressing.
And there were players in tears because they didn't win and didn't do better.
Yeah,
so that said a lot about Wales.
There's not a. I mean, I always feel, God, they must be a bit terrified coming up against the England side. But they come out, the commitment that they show. The rugby's been good. I do think with the Scotland game, I mean, I have never seen a better England women's performance. I just thought everything clicked on that day. It was good anyway, but there was not a bad bit. And, it was unfortunate for Scotland, particularly.
Biggest crowd.
It was a wonderful occasion.
34,000.
Yeah, but it was a wonderful occasion. And the SRU, had really made sure that, just even the little things like, the team arriving. They'd never really done that before, and arriving, and you could see the girls were in tears, coming through the crowds of people, and I have to say, because personally, on the few occasions when I've been really emotional, I've played like a drain, and so I think it must be really hard for those women to come into that situation, and be able to say, right, okay, divorce it all.
It's different. England are used to it, aren't they? Now they're used to big
England are
crowds
used
and
to
the
it.
expectation and the pressure.
But with the
whereas-
Scottish girls, I mean, that was so emotional. To be playing in a standalone game at Murrayfield, but then to have that crowd and the welcome that they had and everything else, it was really, really special. And the same happened last year when we played down at the Principality. That was again, really emotional for everybody, not just them.
And,
That was
and then
emotional.
and then on the community side, how's that? Because it's quite an exciting time right now. We were talking before we started recording about all the playoffs, and like it feels like a really actually exciting. I love the playoffs all the way down to the regional leagues. It's
Yeah.
added this extra bit of excitement. There's so many cup finals kicking around. So right now it feels like it's because there's a lot of negative stuff that goes on. How do you look at it?
Yeah, the community game is affected by the same things we're all affected by in terms of society. It's changing all the time, and the rugby clubs, are having to adapt to that. So, we can be very negative about our community game, but we have got some fantastic. We've got 1,300, 1,400 clubs. Many of them have got lovely facilities. Some of them are improving their facilities all the time. I've been to 3 new clubhouses this year. And, they're most of them are bursting and thriving. Obviously, the most difficult part of the game is the adult men's game. And, wherever you go, you hear, and, we used to run 5 teams, we now run 3, or we used to run 4 teams, we now only run 2. And that is a concern. And there's a lot of reasons for that. There's not just one.
Adult life has changed.
Exactly. Adult life's changed. Young men go off to, Benidorm for stag weekends, and they all have long weekends away, don't they? They don't want to spend, they don't want to spend from 10 o'clock in the morning till 8 o'clock at night, going to a rugby game and coming back. So there's those issues. They may not want to go in, might not want to. They might be frightened of picking up an injury and having to go into work, not being able to go into work on a Monday, those sorts of things. There's so many aspects of that. And, we have to admit, and I don't think we really thought about it enough, we were really impacted by COVID because our community didn't play rugby for, a year and a half, something like that. And it's not a game you can dip in and out of. You have to be physically fit.
Use it or lose it a little bit, isn't it?
Yeah. So, if you were 24, 25 at the beginning of COVID, 26, 27, you've probably gone and got other things to do. Your lifestyle's changed and you go, oh, no, I won't go back and play rugby. So we lost a huge number of young men. And also then it impacted the young men coming through, the 16 to 18-year-olds, because they didn't play rugby either, And so that's going to take a long time to get over, to do that. So yeah, but we've got lots of different programs. Everybody's working on it, and everybody knows the challenge. It's not that we're not blind to it, and we're doing lots of things, and we've got to build up from the bottom, the funnel at the bottom, because we will always lose people at young men really at 16, at 18. Or after university if they go to university. So we're always going to lose that. Hopefully some of the things we do will stem those losses. But, that's just natural. People will go and do another sport or they'll move away and they won't want to go to the rugby club. So we just need to keep people. So, our schools program is really, really important, getting balls in the hands of young kids so they know what rugby is.
Yeah.
It's a game that they recognise. That that's where we need to keep putting the funnel in at the beginning and have more people come out at the end.
There's still so many untapped market. Like even where we're based in North London, we put our rugby club in the park, and then all those people have literally never seen rugby at all, and they realise. And there's boys and girls, and then those same parents we brought into Southgate. We then took to a festival in Hitchin, and it's fields as far as the eye can see. This huge tag rugby festival. And oh my God, look at this! And it's all boys and girls, and that is the picture you don't see because it does get drowned out by that men's rugby conversation of, well, we used to have 5 teams.
We've done a lot of things like that,
Yeah.
as you probably know. I mean, tag rugby is one of them, but we're using T1 rugby,
Yeah.
which again is flexible,
Yeah.
but it looks more like rugby than touch rugby does, because you've got a scrum and you've got a line out, albeit not contested, but it's pulling people off the field, so you're creating more spaces than if you've just got people in a long line across the field. So that we're using T1 rugby for that reason. So we're doing a lot to really get balls in hand. And I'm glad you mentioned where you are in London, because one of the things we're doing, it's been a bit delayed while we've been going through this governance changes, that we want to regionalise more the development of rugby. So, because, what happens in the Northeast is very different to what's happening in the Midlands. So we need to do that. And one of the things that I fought for and we're doing is that there will, although London itself won't be a separate region, it will have its own strategy. Because I think, as you say, and you hear it all the time, the potential of youngsters in London who don't often have fields. I'm involved with a charity school, Hard Knocks, and we run programs in schools in Westminster, for instance. And they don't have any grass.
No. Well, I mean, the prime example is like Vernon Neve Dunn, who I always give a shout out to, who set up Southwark Tigers in Peckham years ago. He was really pioneering, and he was just a primary school teacher who saw it in an area. And I coached there. I coached under 16s team, and the diverse background there is unlike any other that you will see across the rugby landscape. Yet brilliant, so much raw talent, incredible. So
you've got clubs like Hackney and
Haringey
Riders, even going a bit further out to Eton Manor. So there, and Southwark, as you say, brilliant what they're doing. Yeah, they're brilliant what they're doing. You've got Battersea Ironsiders. I mean, there are clubs.
They're huge,
but there are also an awful lot of young people in London, in central London, who go to school there but don't know what a rugby ball is and don't have the opportunity to even try it. So I'm really pleased that in the future we'll have a strategy for London.
There's a lot of clubs hidden as well, behind things. I was talking to someone the other day. There's loads of clubs that are down a hidden driveway, past the back of school fences. I mean, even look at Streatham Croydon, a prime example. This massive terrace house or whatever it is, it's looks normal. And then behind that is a rugby club.
But you've got Hammersmith as well. Play on a park pitch. So there are clubs around there, and I go around the country speaking to clubs. Most clubs understand that they need to go out into their communities. A lot of them have people, often volunteers who are out in their local schools. A lot of the constituent bodies like Essex run a fantastically big schools program and bring the schools together for competition. So there is a lot being done, and we need to, and we obviously with the T1 rugby and the school managers, but there is more we can do, and that's I think we've always appreciated that, but I'm glad to see in the last few years we've really got to grips with that, and I think that's where we need to be out there and bringing people. I always say to people that rugby and rugby clubs are the most welcoming places you can go to. But if you're not from a rugby background, and I wasn't from a rugby background, you still got to cross that threshold.
How did you get involved, and how did you work? What was your first step into rugby?
So I think my family was reasonably sporting. My dad played football and cricket. But we emigrated to Australia when I was 5. We were 10-pound poms. And of course, that's a very sporting environment there. So all you did was sport. And my main sport was swimming, as it was for all the family. And then when my parents came back when I was 13 and I went to a comprehensive school in Stevenage, sport was the sort of thing. Nobody did sport. The girls thought I was weird because I wanted to go out running at lunchtime. I was the weird girl. I found a like-minded weird person, and we used to do sport together, which was great. And I was still swimming for a while. but that was my first. I always said to me, that was my first thought. What's wrong with these people? Sport's fantastic. So why aren't you doing it? And then I went to university, and I ended up going to university in London. I went to UCL, which is probably not well known for having huge sport, but I went there for different reasons. And I went out with a lad who played rugby, and ended up watching him on a Wednesday, and there were a few other girls there. And I don't know why, but we just decided it would be fun to challenge King's College, who are our varsity rivals, to a game of women's rugby. We didn't know any rugby had ever gone on.
What year? Do you want to ask me what year this was?
This was 1978.
Wow, okay.
So there was no internet. There wasn't like you knew anything. And so I don't, to this day, I know that part of it was competitive because UCL and King's, they still play each other in varsity, but there used to be the commemoration games and the foundation games. And you challenged the other side at your games. And if they didn't put a team out against you, you got the points. Whether that was it, I'm not sure. And they accepted. So we then
It was just a chance to get points. You're like, we thought we we're just going to get the points.
I know. So we pulled in people from, the interesting thing looking back on it, there was no women's football. There were girls playing lacrosse and a lot of hockey girls and things, but there was no football, which is unbelievable to think about that now as well. So we pulled in some of them, and we threw the ball up and down and learnt how to tackle and things like that. And then we went out and played. And I personally, and I know some of the others, just came off of that and thought that was the best thing I'd ever done.
What was it about it?
I just loved it. I think I hadn't really been involved in team sport as such, apart from relays, which isn't really a team sport.
Sort of, yeah, technically.
Technically. I love the fact that it was the team. I love the physicality. I mean, I love tackling. I still do love tackling, although I don't get
Where
a
did you
chance.
play in that game? From what position you played?
I would have played, I think, scrum half, and that's where I ended up playing for about the next 9 years before I moved to centre. But I love tackling. It was just the fact that everybody had to work together, and everybody was required, and subsequently, over the many years, you talk to people, and we've done surveys and things, and people like the fact that it's, that the physicality is really important. You couldn't have rugby without the tackling, so that's never going to change. They like the fact that it's a team and everybody on the team matters and everybody's got a role to play. Apart from the odd winger that people might, but basically everybody's got a role to play. And then there's it's intellectual. You're looking for the spaces. It is, people talk about it being a bit of a chess game. Because
engineering in the scrum, that kind of thing.
Yeah, you're always thinking, well, what are they doing? How are they doing it? What do we need to do? So there's an intellectual nature to it as well, which you're doing on the pitch. The coach is probably standing with his, pulling his hair out up. But, the players are having to, apart from the halftime talk, the players are having to work out, how do we score? So I think it's all of those things, and you talk to people, and I think that's common whether you're male or female playing it. That's a very, very common thing about it.
But that escalated quite quickly because, within 5 years, you're setting up a rugby union.
Yeah, well, again, it was all we came off that and thought, oh, that was great, and then King's challenged us back, and we started ringing up the unions of other universities, particularly where the lads were going to play, and say, any chance you can get a girls' team? It's so funny, isn't it, how it started? And they go, oh, yeah, all right then. So it started building
it's like
up.
football, really, isn't it?
Yeah,
Just
and then they would, that team would start encourage. So, very quite soon there was the likes of Kiel and York and Sheffield and Imperial in London, Essex, Kent. We went to all these places. And then we just decided in 83 that it would be good just to get together. There was a couple of things, how do we all, be more organised about fixtures, because it was all just ringing people up. Somebody must have realised that the RFU, there was an insurance policy. Our lads were covered by an insurance policy for, particularly for catastrophic injury. And I think we thought that'd be a good idea to try and plug into that. So it all happened from UCL, because I was still playing for UCL, even though I'd left 3 years previously. And that's another story.
It's your student.
Well, and so we just sent out a note to people and said, let's meet together. So 17 clubs, 16 university sides, 1 club side, which was Magor in Wales. We met in the theatre at UCL and formed the WRFU.
So that was was that a pioneer to like a world body almost, wasn't it? If you've got all the different unions, or a British body, or because it's not just England, like you said, there was a Welsh club there.
So I mean, we just got all the teams we knew about in England together.
Okay.
Or not in England, but that we were playing. And so I think Swansea University had a team. I think there was one at Caerleon, and there was obviously Magor and things. So we just got all of them together, and it just so happened there were 3 Welsh sides in it. So we weren't an England union, we were the WRFU, Women's Rugby Football Union, and we just covered Britain. We didn't have any Scottish sides at the time.
How did you know that other things were going on then? Was there anything else around the world? Did you have any idea if rugby was being played in New Zealand by women, or?
No, we had no idea. We had absolutely no idea. And it's probably quite hard for probably anybody under 50 or even 40 to understand that, there was no internet, there was no email. So, if you wanted to find something out, you probably went on teletext on the TV, and you read the paper. And of course, they weren't going to be covering anything with women's rugby. So no, we knew nothing about that. And obviously, once we had the WRFU and we all had our roles and we started reaching out, they had been playing in France for about 10 years. They had been playing in the US as well, under I can never remember what the law is, but, they have a regulation that they have to spend on college sport as much on the women as they do on men, which was transformational because, they were well supported. So we found that out. New Zealand, they were playing a lot of touch, obviously, but I don't think they were playing the full contact game, although, again, you go into history and there was once a team years ago that did play, but not on a regular basis. So, yeah, so France and then and the Netherlands as well. And that was partly because they were adjacent to France, but they also had an English guy running the union. So it was interesting. So
it's so small that I guess that's all it takes, isn't it? It's one guy or girl to say, right, let's get a team together, and then suddenly.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. It's also, I think what you also forget is that the men's game didn't have leagues or anything like this. So actually, rugby has taken a long time to get to where it is now, where you've got leagues and systems and Rugby World Cups.
Yes.
They're much more parallel than you think. The men's
Well, it was still very amateur.
Side,
it was still very amateur. It wasn't professional rugby, as you say. There wasn't a men's World Cup till 1987. So this was all before that time. It's weird to think about it, but yeah.
Well, it just took the men about 100 years to do what you guys did in a few years. I think that's really, you kind of just got on with it a little bit quicker than they did.
Well, yeah, I mean, one could argue you've got, because they've done it, it's easier. I mean, one of my big mantras is always, that, we shouldn't follow what the men's game do, because we should do what's right for the women's game. But nonetheless, we had merit tables at the beginning, which was very common in the men's game. Yep. Merit tables and festivals as well, those sorts of things. So
how did the club game came about then on the back of this?
So I was still playing at UCL 3 years after I graduated, as were a couple of others, but also women who'd been playing at the other universities come to London for their first job. They want to play. So they came to UCL, and we suddenly realised we'd put out a side that nobody was actually at UCL. But this isn't any good. And we had some links, I think, again, through the lads at the university with Finchley Rugby Club. And we asked them if we could come and form a team at Finchley, and they said yes. And so that's what we did for the season 84-85 season.
To Finchley with the first team.
Finchley were the first.
Wow.
I was very proud of it as well. So they should be.
And obviously then all the other, I mean, a lot of these other students also went and sort of got involved.
Yeah,
with
so,
as well,
you know, I mean, obviously Loughborough was a big breeding ground of women's rugby players, and they had a Loughborough tournament every year, which, you know, everybody went to. So when a group of them came down, and, you know, very good of them, they said, we're not going to go to Finchley. They went and asked at Wasps, and so Wasps started a side, and then I think in the year or so after that, Saracens started. So that's how it happened. And then over time, people, you know, rugby clubs got the idea that, yeah, they could have a team.
When did that Finchley team first play? Do you remember?
Well, we would have played 84, sort of before Christmas.
So I mean, it's really small timescales, aren't we? We're talking like, and then like, so then straight away, I mean, then there's a World Cup like 6 years later or 7 years later.
I think it was because we weren't part of a union. We weren't part of the RFU. So we were able to make decisions quickly and move quickly. You know, we weren't imbibed with years of history. We were ignorant. You know, we didn't know what was going on. I always talk about the naivety of youth because, you know, we were all in our 20s. You know, we weren't sort of, we didn't know what was going on. So we just thought, well, and we just did what was the next thing to do. So, you know, oh, let's have merit tables. Oh, yeah, that's a good idea. Let's have an international. Oh, yeah, that's a good idea. So it was all a matter of what's the next thing we should do.
Because you'd done a GB game before, hadn't you?
Yeah. So
GB was before England, wasn't it?
Yeah. So what happened was we decided to have, the WRFU decided, we must have known by that stage that France were playing. So we played it out here. I'm looking at the pitch we played it on. So we invited France over. We were GB. We weren't England. We were England and Wales. So we played them in April, I think, of 84. So we were at Finchley. And we got a letter, I believe, from Richmond saying, "Oh, you know, thank you for that. We'd like to, if there's ever a chance of having a women's game, a women's team at Richmond, we'd like that."
This podcast is brought to you by Night Timber, official sparkling wine of England Rugby. Now, you don't always get to work with brands you love, but Night Timber has genuinely been one of my favourite English sparkling wines for a really long time. And they're also sponsoring our wonderful pod. So please make sure you give them a follow on Instagram or visit nighttimber.com. Better still, you can try some at the next Richmond or England game at Allianz Stadium, as their official sparkling wine to both England Rugby and Richmond Rugby Club. And now back to Debs.
So tell me about the World Cup then. When did that conversation first happen? In a pub somewhere, presumably?
Well, I'd have to rely a little bit on various people having written about it because, you know, it's a long
Once
time.
it's written down, that's what happened.
Yeah, well, there's a book, Martin Thomas's book,
Yeah,
The
of
World
course.
in Their Hands. Yeah. And he spent many days, well, he did a lot of interviews. And I had a couple of boxes of stuff up in my house in Cambridge, and he came up and went through them all. So he was able to tell us what we did from the evidence.
From all the haze.
And I apparently in January of 1990, I put a paper to the WRFU. I was on the WRFU. I did various positions like treasurer and press and publicity and different things. I can't remember what I was doing at that time. I said, you know, wouldn't it be a really good idea if we had a World Cup? And I suppose the genesis of that was several things. One is Richmond had been on tour to New Zealand in 1989. And we played 9 games, won 9. You always have to say that. And, you know, we met them, and they were probably started roughly about the same time as us. So they were good games. And when we were down in Canterbury, they talked about the following year having a sort of a festival where they would invite not only clubs from international clubs, but some countries as well. And they asked if Richmond would come. Well, it had taken us about 2 years to raise the funds to go. So we weren't going to go again. So we knew that was happening. There was European Championships that had been with the French and us and Netherlands and Sweden and Holland and Spain were playing in. So that had already started. So there were several things that, and I think it wasn't done because the men had done it. And the first one was in 87, as I said, in New Zealand. It was just really a desire to bring everybody together.
Because the 87 World Cup, even when you talk to the men who were there, it never felt like the major thing. Even a lot of the Six Nations or Five Nation sides, that was still more important.
Yeah, the 87 Men's World Cup didn't really shake a lot of things, you know. I mean, if you look back at the numbers watching it on television, it wasn't very many, and of course they were probably in the middle of the night and things like that. So it didn't have a huge impact. So I don't think that impacted us at all. It was really a desire to get all the different people together. And during the Women's World Cup, we ran a conference as well, which Carol Isherwood led on, and you know that was to bring the coaches together to talk about how we might develop the game. So that was how it sort of came about. It wasn't any desire to.
It's like a whole festival, isn't it? It was more like that sort of thing. It's like, oh, let's have an expo, but we'll play some games.
Well, we had 5. You know, if you got to the final, you played 5 games in 8 days.
Wow,
which is crazy.
Yeah,
you wouldn't do that now. So I would say it was probably more like a festival at that point. But you know, we called it a World Cup because we had 12 nations there.
So the actual first World Cup, then, paint a picture of what that looked like.
Yeah. So obviously after I'd said let's do it, let's do it, and the WRFU said, yeah, great. Go ahead. I wasn't expecting that response. I came down here and 3 women that I knew that played down here had the skills that I wanted. And I had said to the WRFU, I'm not doing it with a committee put on me. I want the people. So that was Alice Cooper, Mary Forsyth and Sue Dorrington. And we set off to organise it. And we had to find teams, first of all. And as I said before, we knew some of the teams that were playing. But we did amazing things like write to the Japan Rugby Union and say, have you got any women playing? And Japan did send a team. I think we got one back from South Africa saying our women don't play rugby. So that was out, So that's how it was. So we built it up. Sue Dorrington went off to try and get sponsors and income. Mary was controlling the finances, of which there were none, obviously. Sport England gave us some, about £5,000 or £10,000 to sort of do the thing. And I went off to try and find venues and accommodation and all of that. And Alice was responsible for the publicity and the promotion and things like that. And and people were really excited. Well, the people coming were really excited, and they had to raise a lot of money, all of them, to sort of get here. And we got to January of 91, and the tournament was going to be in April 91 down at Cardiff. And we realised we hadn't got any money raised, and we'd taken on an agent as well. It's difficult enough to raise money for women's sport now. So you can imagine even then for a tournament that, we didn't know would be televised or anything. And we said to the teams, look, if you can get here, we'll hopefully pay for your accommodation and everything else. But when they came, when it got to January, we knew we couldn't do it. So we wrote to them and we just said, look, we're really sorry. We're probably going to have to can this. And they all said, oh, no, we still want to come. Well, don't worry about it. So that was the spirit in which it was played. And we got a lot of help from a lot of different people. Vernon Pugh, who later went on to become the secretary of the IRB, now World Rugby. He was at Cardiff Harlequins, and we were struggling to get local teams to host the games. And he put a call out for action. So, we then ended up with the likes of Pontypool and Llanharan and Glamorgan Wanderers and Swansea, so that was fabulous. So, that was helpful. The WRU did provide referees for the semis and the final, but otherwise it was referees who just came from all over the country who, wanted to help. And one of the reasons we'd gone to Cardiff was because they wanted to be helpful. So they organised the opening ceremony, which was lovely. You know, can you imagine all those women eventually getting there? And you know,
What did that look like?
so it was held in a courtyard thing, and all the teams came in. Some of them in smart stuff, most of them in tracksuits and things like that. With a band, the Welsh. I won't say which one it is because I'll probably say it's wrong. And you know, there were speeches, and like in the Olympics, the athletes pledged, you know, to uphold the game and the values of the game. And and it was just great. It was the first time they'd all come together. It was brilliant.
So it was quite an eclectic group of nations. Tell me about some of those nations, because there was quite a few interesting ones there, weren't there?
Yeah. So we obviously had England and Wales, so we're still part of the same union. Scotland weren't there or Ireland, because they didn't have a union or teams at the time. We had from Europe, we had Spain, France, Netherlands, Sweden, all of whom we knew were and Italy. We then had the USA, and then we had Japan and New Zealand. I don't know if I've got to 12. Oh, and then obviously Russia, which obviously created a whole lot of stories in their own right.
Did this story in the Rugby Journal as well.
Yeah.
It's incredible, though. There were so many stories about, you know, selling cigarettes and contraband and all sorts of things. Vodka, as well. So what was it like getting to, because you presume you hadn't seen, it's not like you played these guys regularly or anything.
No, I mean, obviously we'd only played, I think we played Netherlands and Sweden and Italy and France, and that's all we'd really played. Yeah, I mean, for them, it's really difficult for me because I was organising it. So I didn't sleep for a week. You know, we were having to do things like, we stayed in Sophia Gardens, we were put up there. I had a 5-month-old daughter as well. But they were, we were having to get the team sheets in, type them up, get them off to get printed for a programme. We were match managing. We had volunteers doing merchandise sales. It was just mad. And Alice, so of the 4 of us who, and there were a lot of volunteers who were organised as well, but of the 4 organisers, Mary was at home because she'd just given birth a week before the final. Sue was playing for England, and Alice and I were sort of there doing the hard work, and we didn't sleep. It was just, and so I didn't really see many of the players. And, you know, and Carol, as I said, was organising a conference, and she was playing as well. But I didn't get to that because there was just so much other stuff to do, and just make sure, you know, and I was match managing, you know, so you were having to get out each time and make sure it was all happening. It was madness.
And then you had to do it again. And then there's another World Cup again. Well, when did you decide there was going to be another one? How did it work after that?
Thankfully, my son was born the night before the next World Cup, so people would call it avoidance.
You dodged a bullet.
It was interesting because, we were exhausted. I mean, really exhausted. I came back and played another year here at Richmond before I then retired. 2 years I played. But we then heard that the Netherlands, the rugby union, had decided that they would organise the next one in 94. So it's 3 years. What happened then, which is, you know, again been subject of a play and lots of sort of research, is that about 8 weeks before that, they pulled out, apparently because they'd been put under pressure by the IRB, because it wasn't an IRB. Their women were part of the National Union. They were part of the IRB. We, as the RFU, were not part of as WRFU, were not part of RFU or World Rugby. So although we'd had a couple of difficult meetings with them where they said we couldn't do it, we just...
Why could you not do it? What would possibly be the reason why they would not want it to happen?
Well, that does seem a good question.
Yeah.
So they were... I mean, I got asked twice to meet them. I went down to Bristol where they had their offices, and then I went up to the Royal Garden Hotel where they used to have their annual sort of meetings. Their point was that they'd just had the Men's World Cup in 87. The next one was in 91 as well. Here, I think it was over Wales, England, and maybe some of the other unions. So, 6 months after our huge competition, they were going to have their World Cup. And they said, we're a bit worried about, you denigrating our competition. And I was like, really? Really? So they didn't offer help.
Yeah.
But they thought that we were impacting on their competition, which was rubbish, to be honest. They were obviously persuaded the Netherlands that they couldn't do it. And a group of women in Scotland said, well, this isn't any good. We're going to do it. And they were supported by the SRU, but they went ahead. They weren't allowed to call it a World Cup. It was called a championship, I think. One of the teams pulled out. I think it was New Zealand pulled out because it wasn't a sanctioned tournament. And they went ahead. They got a student side in to make up the numbers. And obviously England won that.
So obviously the USA had won the first one.
The USA beat England in the final in the first one, and then England beat the USA in the second one. And it was many years later, into the 2000s, before the IRB sanctioned and included those first two, because the 1998 World Cup was held in the Netherlands, and it was an IRB sanctioned tournament. So it wasn't until 10, 15 years later that they included the first two in the...
It's funny because it's so loose, isn't it? It's all so loose. And like, when did you see a World Cup that you think, okay, because it was like random casual festival rugby vibes, and then suddenly, when was that? Okay, now this is a big deal. Was there one where you thought, oh God, look at this now?
I went to the 2002 one, which was in Spain, and that was good, but it was pretty... nobody really knew about it still.
There weren't many crowds.
The 2006 was in Edmonton, and there was even less crowds.
Yeah, I remember.
I think they call it Deadmonton, don't they?
Yeah.
And it wasn't televised. I have to say, I think the first one where it felt more proper was the one that we hosted in 2010, and we got television coverage for the first time, which was amazing. We were still, the RFUW was still not part of the RFU, but we put our bid in through the RFU because they're the IRB member, and they helped with that a lot. But it was the crowds and and we had we took the formula that we had all the pool games down at Surrey Sports Park, so we'd have three days of pool games, and we'd have 6 games on each day. I think that was right. And then we had the semi-finals and the finals at the Stoop, Harlequins ground. So that felt a lot more, and we filled the Stoop as well, but 14,500, but it was still something. So I think with the television coverage and that, it felt proper to me. And then France did a similar format in 2014. Ireland did a similar format in 2017. Has to change the year.
Yeah, flipped a year, didn't it?
Yeah. But of course, the last one, and the one last year, which we hosted, was just blew all of those out the window.
Why do you think that was? Do you think what was the circumstance behind this that meant that these two did explode in that way? Because it's
the first time I think it was because of us, because we pushed for it. We wanted to, the WRFU. Obviously, this last one was run under a new model, which is that, so previous World Cups, you'd have a local organising committee. This one was actually run by World Rugby with input from us. So it was a different model. And, World Rugby is part of their strategy. They've just got behind it and decided that this is an opportunity to really sell the women's game. And it did.
It's just a huge area of growth, isn't it? I mean, I don't know what the percentages are when it comes to looking at the growth of the game, comparing sort of boys, girls, men's and women's, but it feels like it's this massive opportunity that everyone's got to adapt just to keep the men's game going as well.
Yeah, I mean, I said leading up to the Women's World Cup that it was, it's about marketing the game, not just the women's game, because you get boys there, you get dads, you get, I think, we've got stats about who attends things like the England-Wales game at Ashton Gate, and there's a lot of men, a lot of male people coming to watch it. It's about putting rugby on there. Lots of people now say they watch it, they don't necessarily think, oh, this is women playing. They're watching a game of rugby. So it's about marketing our game, and that's a good thing.
Yeah.
And so a lot of those people wouldn't go watch a men's game.
Yeah.
Which is good because it's additive to our whole game. So I think if you look at it, yes, we want the game to be financially sustainable, and obviously the World Cup costs World Rugby a lot of money. But you have to look at the return at the moment as well in terms of people just watching it.
Yeah.
The players, we know that our players have gone up as a result of that. It's youngsters as well. And I think the thing is, when you're in England and you see the World Cup and you see what, our Red Roses are putting out there on socials and really doing great stuff in terms of building
building a culture, aren't they?
Building culture, building profile. But what's interesting is and I've spoken to if you speak to some of the other nations, it was happening there. I mean, one of the innovative things that World Rugby did is they put a content creator in with each team.
Yeah.
That hadn't been done before. And that was really interesting because, what was going back to France, what was going back to Fiji, what was going back to South Africa, we didn't see really, did we?
It would have probably all been very different. That's what you want, isn't it?
Yeah, but you want it. And, the stories I've heard about the impact that the rugby has had in Fiji, for instance, and the Fijian Rugby Union very much using it to campaign against domestic abuse and things like that. It's so much bigger than just what happens on the pitch. It's a real cultural thing, particularly because it's women playing. And, in some very traditional male environments, you've suddenly got a lot of strong women who are enjoying themselves and speaking out. And that can make a huge difference. So, in some ways, the rugby becomes unimportant in that sense to me because it's a social change. And I think even in this country, we've seen the growth of women's sport with the Lionesses and the cricket as well. It's changing culture. And I think that's a good thing.
So what happens next for you after the presidency? How do you top that?
Oh no,
Global?
No. I've been on World Rugby. I was on World Rugby for 5 years. So no. I mean, I'm obviously have a year as immediate past president.
What does that mean?
Well, we very much work as a team. So there's a junior vice president, your junior vice, senior vice, then president, then immediate past president. Then you fall off a cliff after that. And but we very much work as a team because there's an awful lot of events to cover that you can't just do it as one person. So there will be things that I do. When we've got the weekends for the counties and the championship of the cups coming up, you need a team of people there because you've got 4 games to host. So we very much want. So but I'm here. I'll be here at Richmond. I'm going to get more involved. They've been very good this year. I could have stepped down, but I've sort of done a little bit. But I want to do more. There's so much exciting stuff happening here that I want to be part of.
Well, so the both, the women's side, you were there this weekend.
Yeah,
they seem to be in a good place at the moment.
So we've got into the championship final, which will be played at Twickenham played at the Allianz.
Play at Allianz, please.
Played at the Allianz,
Madam President.
No, dude, I'm really good at that, and I don't know why I slipped up there. So that's played on May the 24th, but also our second women's team, the Valkyries, is also there. Because they won their league. So we've got 2 women's teams on the 24th of May.
That's brilliant because
at the Allianz.
Were they had so many teams and they were really
Yeah, we had
pioneering,
3
weren't
at
they?
one stage. I mean, all rugby clubs go through this because you're actually dependent on people and you're dependent largely on volunteers.
It's
And
cyclical.
over time these things happen, and you like a small business, you have to keep recruiting volunteers. You have to, and these things, people leave, and one of the biggest things, if one person only, I hear this with women's teams in particular, a club say, oh yeah, we had a women's team and they're no longer functioning, but that's largely because one person was coaching and running it. If you've got to bring these things into the club and the club governance and the club management, so that you are constantly refreshing and building. And it's the same with the minis and the juniors, isn't it? If they're not part of the club, they can easily drop off because people leave and they don't get replaced. So there's a lot to do here, which is really exciting. We're doing a master plan for the whole site. It's bits of it are pretty old, but we've got 7 pitches here. We want some artificial pitches.
Yeah. Necessary evil with the English weather, isn't it, really?
Yeah, and we also want to make the most of this. We're on Crown Estate land. I think they're supportive of that. We want to make the most of this fantastic asset in Richmond. Brilliant transport links for sport, obviously primarily rugby, but let's.
So when's your tenure actually end officially?
End of July.
So you're into trophy season now, isn't it? Have you just got to be handing out a lot of trophies in the next sort of month or so?
Yeah. No, that's basically what it is. We obviously had the SGM last Friday.
Just for those who don't know, explain what that vote was.
So we called an SGM. Council are charged with looking at the governance of the union every 5 years. We'd had a long process, good couple of years, and there were some proposals, quite, I wouldn't say radical, but quite different, in order to change the governance of the union. And that didn't go through. You need 66% of those that voted to get that through. I think it was 55 against and 45 for. So, disappointing. But there's a lot of positives to come out of it. We put forward some quite radical things to do, and those have been aired and discussed. Most people felt that a large part of what we were proposing was right, but there were a few things people weren't comfortable with. And, this is massive. You're changing something like that. It'll be forever, almost. So it was really important to go get it right. So we will look at it. We're reflecting. There are a lot of things, because this was about rule changes. But before that, they were to underpin the 31 proposals that council had approved, and a lot of those don't need rule changes. So we need to have a framework for engagement with our clubs in terms of consultation and how we communicate with them. And we need to get that done quickly, and we need to embed that so that it's part of it, so that the clubs who were a little bit uncomfortable with the way we were going forward can see that actually this is how it works. It's quite hard to vote for something when it depends on a lot of things happening.
A lot of us are obviously in a great position where we get to have these conversations. So a lot of us who are writing about it or covering it, we understand it because we're able to do this.
Yes.
So you've got to get that across to clubs. How many clubs have voted?
About 750, which is good, which is really good.
But also, it's about them understanding all the information and finding the best ways to communicate them. All volunteers as well.
Yes,
Everyone's still
yes.
volunteers. So the idea that they will have fully understood and read and watched and done everything across the board means, and if you don't know everything, then you are on the side of caution.
Yeah, and yeah, exactly. And I think that happened a lot. But I also think that, because it felt to us in it that the process had gone on for a long time. which it had. You're probably 18 months or more longer, 2 years. And we were also anxious to bring it back to the members as soon as we could. And, maybe if we had not brought it back at that SGM, waited some time. And so you had that tension between, we've got to bring it back, but we need to prepare.
Yeah.
And maybe look at how we presented it and look at what the rule changes were. So, there's some learnings from that. But I'm not as disappointed as some people might think I ought to be. I think a lot of those changes will still happen, but they'll happen in a different time frame and a slightly different way. And we'll end up with the right answer.
I think it's good that a lot of conversations are coming to an end. Like, the champ thing has been rolling on for so long. And I think now all those decisions, and actually we were in our podcast we've done with Mike Rea, one of the things he's talking about is them being the best club side in the country, and that means winning the championship, because above the Premiership will be franchises, a different sort of format. So it changes the game a little bit. So it feels like the thing's settling down a bit.
Yeah, and it's not franchised.
No, I know. Sorry, not franchised, but
you can correct me on that answer, and I'll correct you. I'm fantastic. No, I mean, I think the Premiership thing's really interesting, and again, that's happened under my watch, which has been really exciting. And they've done a huge amount of work. The Premiership needs to have better coverage. It needs more clubs, and I think that's the really important part of it. They recognise they need more clubs. They need, we desperately need clubs in Yorkshire. There's nothing in Kent. You've got past Exeter. They've still got a lot of rugby. So there's a lot of places in the country where we could have a Premiership rugby side successfully. And we need more mass anyway, in order for there to be more people watching, to better television coverage, sponsorship. So all of that is part of it. So the recognition by the Premiership and everybody that it needs to grow and it needs to be more sustainable and to be more investable in the clubs. We need to make the whole thing better. Will hopefully get us over the impasse that we've basically had for the last umpteen years in terms of championships clubs going up to the Premiership. And if everybody's recognising that and everybody wants to work towards that, which they do, as club office is going to be real help. And we've already seen that since that decision was made, that there's been new investment coming into the game. So if everybody's behind that, then hopefully what we will have in 6, 10, 12 years is a larger Premiership covering the country, more sustainable, more investable, and the champ will find its place, I believe, and this is personal view, really, as the top of the community game. Yes, they won't be necessarily all, there'll be payment, but it's more the top of the community game, as opposed to having some clubs in there who really want to be in the Premiership. Hopefully they'll be in the Premiership.
It feels that in a way it could be more open, because it means you can build a business.
Yes.
We were talking to Ryan Lamb from Plymouth recently, and he was saying because of all the development that's going on there with the football club using the same grounds, they'll have access to some of the best facilities in the second tier if they get to the second tier. And obviously there's a huge amount of potential in a city like Plymouth, where the football team's third tier as well, and it's got heritage with rugby being in Devon and Cornwall. So it means, in a way, the idea of it's not necessarily even just clubs that are in the champ. There's other ones that could potentially sort of build.
This will impact all the national leagues as well, and that's really important. So I'm enthused about what that decision meant. So I will correct you on the franchising, because I think
that's like a tabloidy way of doing it as well, wasn't it? That was like me slipping it in there, so I didn't even.
But it is more about creating a larger, better geographical spread top league that is professional, that is successful, and they'll also have obligations down to the community as well in which they operate, They want to create their, grow their community rugby as we do. So it's about working together much more on that than we perhaps are now.
How have you changed from being president? Have you changed because you've discovered more or seen more? Because you're so ingrained with the rugby club anyway.
Well, I mean, that's why I got involved in Richmond, because I like being on both sides. I like to see it from both sides. This year I've obviously been very conscious of any potential conflict. So, I've sort of I'll give them the information, but let them make up their minds here at Richmond. And obviously, when I'm at the RFU, then I have a conflict because I'm secretary at Richmond. But you just manage it. It'll be nice. I there are things that as I said before, that I want to do here at Richmond that I can't do that. I've not got the time, and so I'm really looking forward to getting my teeth stuck in. They're probably not. Oh no!
It'd be nice to be able to finish off your presidency handing a trophy to the Richmond girls.
That's going to be fantastic. Yeah, because last year they were in the final, but they didn't win. So if they do that for me, I'll be really pleased.
And over when you look back on your rugby life, because that's what we've been doing here. What are the things that stand out for you? Because obviously you've been so involved in the administrative side as well as the playing side. What are the moments when you think of your great rugby moments that stand out for you?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I suppose there's two, because with establishing the first Women's World Cup was not something that I really appreciated or thought about to many years later, and that was partly because we were inducted into the World Rugby Hall of Fame in New Zealand at the World Cup in 2022, and the conversations I had there made me realise how important it was. I knew it was a lot of hard work, and it was an important thing. But we've just had the 10th Women's World Cup, and we've had 10 Men's World Cups. If we had not done that outside of all the IRB or whatever and started it off, somebody said, we may not even have had a Women's World Cup, because you would have been dependent on others to do it. So appreciating that, and then all the publicity and things that come from around that, and having last year's World Cup has been immense and pleasurable. But it is little things that, not little things, I mean, I was on the RFU board when we approved permanent contracts for the Red Roses. And that was quite, that was quite difficult. And I think it's the only time I've burst into tears in a boardroom. But
because it was signed, or because the process?
Because I was frustrated that it wasn't being signed. But it did get signed. I missed my son's. My son didn't go to his graduation day because I had a boardroom meeting. So
has he forgiven you for that?
Yeah, hopefully. He's been to a lot of rugby games because of me. So. But so it's little things like that where you realise so much effort's gone into it, and it's not come easy, and it's been difficult, and those are things that I remember, probably because they've taken such a lot of hard work. But it's been fabulous. I mean, I remember coming back from Leicester last August when we had the warm-up game against Spain at Leicester Tigers, and I was sitting on the train coming back, and this little girl came up and asked me to sign the programme and have a photograph taken, and it was like, oh, wow.
That's amazing.
It is. And I've had a lot of selfies. I think going around the clubs, I've been very, very well received and welcome. And I think a lot of people are, I can't use the word chuffed that the RFU has a female president. It says something about the game that they're playing.
Is there a pipeline? Is there more?
There are more. There are.
Positions?
We have I think 8 or 9 women on council, so all of them could do that.
And are you seeing when you go down to grassroots clubs, are there more female chairs as well?
Definitely. And we did a profiled quite a lot of them during the World Cup. Yeah, and my being there gives them confidence in what they're doing. So that's a fantastic recognition when I go around. The women who are involved in these clubs feel validated in a way. I think that's probably the right word. So yeah, it is good, and I think we're okay as a sport. I don't, yes, we've got, you read about issues of misogyny and racism, and obviously nobody wants that, and we have to keep doing our best to make sure that people know it's not acceptable in our sport. But as a sport on the whole, as I said before, I think we're very welcoming. We want people to come and play our game. We've got to do more to go out there and bring them in.
Thanks very much. Absolute pleasure.
Great.
And thanks for having us. And for anyone that hasn't seen it, there's also a video where Deborah meets the winemaker from Nye Timber, where you guys talk about the way in which you're both pioneering. So
and drank quite a lot.
And there was a lot of Nye Timber drag. So it's ironic that we're talking now, having just listened to a soundtrack of 100 beer barrels being unloaded and loaded. But actually, this is sponsored by Nye Timber. We're also the partner of Richmond Rugby and England Rugby. So do check out their site and the Instagram video. But thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.